Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Hi, my name is Rob Hutchinson. I'm the Director of Church Development for the Western North Carolina Conference. I'm a pastor and someone who's trying to be a little more meditative in my life. We're going to play a conversation that my friend Ashley, she's going to introduce herself here in just a second, had around meditative practices. And Ashley, introduce yourself and let's let them know what happened.
Yeah, I'm Ashley Thomas. I am a pastor here in the conference as well, and I work as the School of the Spirit missioner and as a leadership and ministry development coach with Passion and Partnership. And yeah, we were going to do the practice, but we ended up talking through as we walked through the practice. So if you are looking to just walk through the practice, you can listen first, but then you can just carry the senses with you out of this practice, because we're just going to spend some time noticing what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we feel, to bring ourselves into the present moment. And so you can just take those senses with you and you can journal. If you're a journaler, you can journal, with them, one or two things that actually stuck out to you from the practice and what you might be hearing from God in it. But this will be the conversation really all the way through. Yeah.
So peace. Be still. Ashley, it's great to be with you today as we take a few minutes during one of the busiest, potentially craziest, most pressure-filled, high anxiety, high expectation times of the year.
Hello.
Christmas songs tell us this is the most wonderful time of the year. The happiest feelings of all are going on right now, right?
Yeah, catch it all.
You catch it, every single bit of it. The Christmas spirit is just dripping off of you, right? Yeah, well, I know in the midst of all this, mind is one of those that is always moving and shaping, and sometimes it's really hard for me to find those still moments, to be still and to know God. And I know we're both pastors, and as pastors, but also as believers, we also want to be sure that in the midst of all this, particularly in the season, that we can tend to our faith in the midst of our hectic, happiest feeling everyday lives. You up for that?
I am up for that.
Yeah, and I know you've got some meditative experience that I just struggle with, and so we're going to lean into you and lean on you today to maybe give us a couple of real tangible things to help us in the midst of the season. I know it's really challenging for me to still be still when I can't sit still.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you, I have ADD, and so my brain has a hard time slowing down sometimes, and really challenging sometimes in my life of faith. I've also noticed, and in conversation with folks being a pastor who, are really good at sitting still, that they still appreciate someone who can come along and just maybe give us just something to wrap our brains around, to grab some of these moments that we all long for to have with God. Particularly during this time of season, everything else that's going on, it's so easy to let what's most important to get away from us. So just to set us up, I wanted to just maybe describe what my daily devotion might look like. I was thinking about this morning, and I do YouVersion. I do sometimes a couple of different things. Been on this study. It's an Advent study, and it had in it Lectio Divina built into it this morning as part of it. And I read through the passage, and it was part of the reading that's in the thing for the lectionary for whatever might land on today. And it's from Luke. It was Luke 1:46 through 56. I've been scrolling through my phone to find it right here just to make sure I was being that. But it was Mary responding about how her soul praises the Lord, and we were invited to, read through it and then center ourselves and contemplate, on it. So I read through it the first time and I was with it. And then the second time I started reading through it and I went into contemplation mode. And this is what happened when I went into contemplation mode. I was thinking just how amazing Mary was to be able to, let her spirit rejoice in God, her Savior. And then I started thinking about my dog that I hadn't taken out yet. And then I realized that all the things that were sitting on my desk this morning that I had to work. And I think I've already had 3 Zoom meetings today, and I was thinking about each one of those. And then I remembered that I was supposed to be contemplating contemplating. So I pulled myself back to Mary and her joyous moment. And, the scripture said, he took notice of his lowly servant girl. And, and then she launches into how great God is. And I was into that for a moment. And then as I was thinking about how great God was, I was thinking about the great hamburger I had the other day. It was
right.
amazing. And so, just thinking about great went that way. And then my brain I actually looked to the left and there was a bird that had flittered and banged against the window. So I contemplated on the bird for a moment and I forgot about Mary. And this is really kind of the story of my devotional life. I start thinking about where God is and what God can do inside me and in me and with me and through me. And then I start thinking about my lunch.
Right.
Or I start thinking about the song that's on the radio that has nothing to do with God. Or I start thinking about the argument I had with my friend the other day. And I get so far away from God and I'm trying to contemplate and I'm trying to meditate and I'm trying to stay focused. But my brain just keeps going other places. I would love some wisdom around what that's like. And I know you and I have before talked about, mindfulness. And even though I know it's not true, but when my mind wanders, I feel guilty that I've done something wrong. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to that for a minute.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for sharing all of that because that is normative. This is a normative.
I'm normal?
You are normal. Yeah.
Some people would not describe me as normal.
There might be other things, but in this particular practice of devotion and trying to stay present in a devotion or in a prayer time or in meditation, our brains do wander everywhere, and that's a human condition. So think about how incredibly God has created our brains. And they can think about multiple things all at one time, which is just a wonder in and of itself.
That could be a meditative moment, just thinking about that.
It could. And so to know we are created this way. So one, there's miracles that are happening in our synapses of just that we can hold all these thoughts at one time. And in somehow, shape, or form, that alone could reflect God's glory of just that God, how much more God can hold at one time as we're holding all of that at one time. And part of solitude, stillness, mindfulness is to just keep returning back. And it's more of returning back to the present moment because that's where God can reach us, is in the present moment. And so much more than just making everything else disappear. That might be a byproduct of grace that happens in a moment, and it might be 30 seconds or it might be 20 minutes. But that's really grace, and it's a gift that comes to us. Not something we actually create ourselves. We are just placing ourselves before God and being present without judgment or anything and trusting that God's going to meet us in the present moment.
And I'm not sure if everybody appreciates the image, but a long time ago, God and I kind of came to this understanding that my meditative moments were going to be scattered. And I sometimes describe it as coming to a hectic peace. I know it's a contrast of words, but, for me, I treasure and long for moments of stillness. I want that, that almost seems fairy tale-ish, almost that be still and know that I am God, that I can have that mountaintop moment where everything just comes to a halt and there's nothing else except for me and God. And, and then the crickets start going, and then not just the crickets, but the wind's blowing. And then I notice the leaf that's blowing along the way, and I'm following the leaf, and suddenly I'm not thinking about God anymore. And so I long for more and more moments of peace and stillness, and particularly this time of year. I mean, just everything's so crazy. And so I was hoping, for our time together that maybe you could help, particularly us folks who can't sit still, but long to be still, to long for what God offers to us, and maybe we could practice, something that we could do on a regular basis, and that maybe can give us more and more moments, even if it's not a lengthy moment. Maybe it's 30 seconds of peace. Maybe it's 5 seconds of peace. Maybe it ends up being 5 minutes of peace. It doesn't matter, but just some of us maybe aren't in the practice of helping ourselves get to that moment or invite God into those kind of moments. So what do you got for me? I need some help.
Yeah. So one of my favorite new practices that I have been doing since this fall, I attended an online retreat, and one of the breakout rooms, Morgan Harper Nichols is an amazing artist and writer, but she was leading this breakout session, and she did this meditative experience that I have just loved. So that's what I want to practice today. And it brings...
So we're going to practice it right here, right now.
We are. Yeah. And,
all right.
And the purpose is, again, to bring us into the present moment. So for me, I live in my head constantly. I actually will not pay attention to my body. It'll be a long time before I realize my foot has fallen asleep, because I'm so lost in my own thoughts. And so part of what this practice can do is to help our minds and our bodies and our souls show up in the same place at the same time. Because oftentimes our body might be somewhere, our soul might be somewhere else, and our brains, are thinking about something off into the future. Like they're not all in the same place at the same time. So
even that moment when all those things come together can even be we have to look at that as a moment of grace too.
Yeah. And because God just really meets us so powerfully in the present moment. Right. God is with us.
Amen.
That's the present tense.
Yes.
So
right now.
So right now.
Okay.
In this moment. Yeah. So we are going to now enter into this practice, and it's with all of our senses. And so this is more of a body meditation, the wonder and amazingness of how God has allowed us to take in information, not just through our brains, but through our actual senses, to bring us into the room, into this present moment. So to start us all off, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. So to start off, my breath prayer is 3 deep breaths, and I do so in order to center my heart in the life of the Trinity. So I take a deep breath, just placing myself in the presence of the Father. Joining my heart with the heart of Christ, the Son. And joining my breath with that life-giving breath of the Spirit. And then we're going to start with what we see. So we're going to start with our eyes. So you don't have to sit still in this. You get to be looking and moving. Yeah. So just notice one thing in your line of sight.
Do you want me to tell you what that is?
You're welcome to. Yeah. And take a moment, notice it first, and then tell me about it in just a second. But just look at it for a little bit.
All right. Was that long enough? Because remember, I can't sit still.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Right.
And it's awkward if we stay too long on a pause.
That's true.
Yeah, on a podcast.
Yeah. So you want me to tell you what it is?
Yeah.
We're sitting in my office, and on my shelf is a piece of pottery. It's a piece of art from a worship service I did at West Market Street, Methodist Church in Greensboro. We had just started a contemporary service, and we were talking about the potter and the clay, and actually had a potter that came in with her wheel and threw a piece of pottery while I was preaching and talking about this. And while we were doing that, everybody in the congregation had been given a small piece of clay also. And while we were talking, they were invited to, because, I'm ADD and like two things. So we invited them to fidget, and whatever emerged from their piece of clay would come. And so the potter not only threw this piece of clay, but then she took all those pieces, took it back to her studio, combined them all together, and then fired it and glazed it, and it sits on my shelf. And the thing, my eye was drawn to that too, just because one, I love it, the piece of art that it is, but also that it represents a piece of what we're trying to capture here. There was a moment that was very moving for me, not only when she was, working the clay itself, but as people added their pieces. But then it was that gift that keeps on giving, because she brought it back, a couple of weeks later in a completely different form. That was, I love it. It takes me back to that moment, but also, there was the Spirit was alive in that moment. And it's another thing, I guess why I'm hoping to do a little bit better job with my own spiritual care because I long for more and more of those moments. And I don't think I allow myself to have enough of them.
So one of the things that captured my attention in what you just said is it's the gift that keeps on giving. And the gift literally is giving right here in this moment.
Yeah, that's cool.
So now we're going to move to what we hear. And you may want to close your eyes for this one so that...
If I'm driving in my car, should I close my eyes?
Yeah, you should not do that if you're driving in your car. Keep your eyes on the road. But if you are at a safe place where you could close your eyes, then it might help that sensory thing have more bandwidth. So pay attention to one or two things. that you hear in this moment. And then we're going to walk through the next few senses because we're not going to talk about all of those out loud. So just hold this one for now and pay attention to what you hear. And it is this awkward time on podcast. You got to be careful of inviting somebody to do a meditation on podcast. They might enter into awkward silence. Yeah. But the stillness of holding this space for a little bit allows more sounds to pop up than what you first might notice. So if you're doing this at home or at another time, you may want to elongate that silence even more just to see what else you pick up in your hearing that you may not have been paying attention to before.
Yeah, so practicality for those of us who have a hard time sitting still, I could have gone longer with the silence. However, sometimes we just need that permission to, it's okay if you break it or if you have to move back. It is my goal to have a long period of silence, or what's my goal in the midst of the silent piece? How do I know that it's something that's maybe meaningful or helpful for me?
That is a great question that I am nervous to answer, because I think any gift of time we give to God makes God smile. So if that's 30 seconds of our time, or if centering prayer is a full 20 minutes. And in meditation, they say it takes about 10 minutes to even begin to settle into the silence. So there are definitely practices that help us sink further and further into the peace of silence. And yet so many people just feel like they fail at it and then don't even try anymore.
Don't even try again.
And so that's what I don't want to do is to keep anybody. So again, whatever attention we give to God, I think makes God smile. And grace works beyond anything that we control. So there's not a limit that God says, well, I'll only talk to you if you do this much time. It's more just showing up and maybe leaving the judgment behind, just being with God and letting it be. Okay, you ready for the next one?
I am.
All right. So this time, we're going to pay attention to what we smell. And that could be something great. That could be, oh my gosh, did I put on deodorant today? It could be any of those things, but just this is something we often ignore until we have to. But just to take a moment to realize the space we're in through what we smell. So take a few deep breaths. And we're going to do the same with our taste. Yeah, take a minute to recognize what we taste. Is it onions left over from lunch? Is it coffee? Is it, just regular breath? What is it that we actually taste?
I know what I'd like to taste.
Right?
Some Christmas cookies, because we were talking about that. I might have just derailed it, but
that's all right.
It's okay?
It's okay.
All right.
It's okay. Yeah. Non-judgmental, noticing. Non-judgmental noticing. So I taste this, but I really would like to taste that. And then lastly, we're going to do what we can actually feel. And so that might be the chair holding you up. If you're in the sunshine, it could be sunshine on you, or shade or wind if you're outside, or air or heat, just your clothes, just what 2 or 3 things that you can feel and notice that you feel in this moment. All right. Now we're going to do all of this again, but from a different vantage point. So you can either, if you're listening to this, I do recommend if you can go into a completely different room.
Right.
Or if you can go outside if you were inside, or go inside if you've been outside, to just change your spot. However, you can also do this just right where you are and literally turn your chair in a different direction, just to change the vantage point. And we're going to do that again, but offline, and then come back and talk about that.
What the experience was like.
What the experience was like.
So if you're on podcast, you can press pause, and we invite you to go and experience this practice. And Ashley and I are going to go do that. And then we're going to come back and we're going to debrief it very quickly. And then we're going to send you on your way.
Yeah. So go
it's
notice.
Hard for me to sit still.
Right. Yeah. So go notice one or two things that you see, you hear, you smell, you taste, you feel.
All right, we're back. We went outside and did that same experience and actually took about 20 minutes to do it, and then had some side conversations. So let's try to synthesize some of that learning. For me, that experience was completely different when we did it again and when we got outside of my office to a different space. There was more sensory input, and I'm a sensory dude, so that was good for me. And I had some moments. I'm still battling, as this guy who has a hard time sitting still, to get to that place. Maybe I have that idealistic thing in my brain where, I'm going to end up suddenly having 20 minutes of peace and quiet and stillness. Is that the goal for this? What am I hoping to head towards?
Right. So again, the hope is to show up in the present moment with your mind, your soul, and your body all being in one place, open to what God might share or show. Or if it just ends up, you don't have like an epiphany type moment, that you can just almost like Mary does, just treasure the time, treasure the time in your heart. Even if no like big epiphany, you might have a shepherds in the field with the angels and the chorus.
That'd be awesome.
Right? That'd be fantastic. Or you might just have like an ordinary experience of like random people you've never met before that you hear and see for the first time, and you just treasure all those things in your heart.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like it's a silver bullet for anybody.
No, it's not.
I wish it was.
I know.
I want that perfect program that's going to fix my meditative life.
Yes.
So I'm hearing that there's some investment on my part and some openness to allow God's grace and God's Spirit to move in and around me and through me and with me. And
to trust, the deep trust that God is with us regardless if we feel it or not. That we are practicing a deep faith when we show up and nothing happens. So, perhaps even a deeper faith.
So practicing a deep faith even when I feel like I'm standing in shallow water.
Yes.
That can happen.
That it perhaps may be the deepest of all.
This sounds like this could be something that could be done anytime, any place. I don't have to necessarily carve out 20 minutes, just to sit. Although for some people that would be incredibly helpful to be regimented and to be routinized and all that.
Yep.
And for other people, I could envision, doing this, in my 5-minute drive to the office, or if I'm anywhere, really. I could pull in and do these. It's just tapping into the 5 senses and trying to meet God through those senses, trying to sense God's presence and Spirit and wherever I am, whatever I'm doing. That sounds like something a guy who can't sit still could actually do.
Yeah. And for me, I try to practice this in places that I feel slightly uncomfortable so that I can show up and not try to run away in my mind. So in crowded rooms, I'll try to pay attention to what I'm seeing, who I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm experiencing, so that I can show up. Because sometimes I phone it in where my body is there, but I'm not really there.
I hear you.
And so this is a way, and again, we talked about this a little bit on the porch, but Thomas Aquinas talks about that our real brokenness is that we have bent over backs and all we can do is navel gaze. We're just caught up. I know, right? We're just caught up in ourselves, and that makes it really hard to love our neighbor and to love God. And so what this practice helps us do is to straighten up our back and help us to look outward and upward. So when we're caught in our day, when we're caught in the busyness, we can take a moment to lift our gaze and notice outward and upward what is going on. And perhaps that's the greatest gift, is to get us outside of ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I know that's part of my struggle, is just getting outside of myself. And I think some of this, we talked a little bit too about this outside of, there's something in us that drives us to try to orchestrate these moments. And, there's something inside of us that, we long so much to have more of what God so freely gives to us. And then we want to orchestrate that process. I remember one of my parishioners one time we were talking about, that we need to give in and let God, do what God does best. Yeah. And I remember this person saying, but I just want to help him. That's, we all have that desire we know that God is the one that can do that best. Man, we just want to help that along and try to force the process along. And I know that, I'm sure that will be one of the things that I need to work on for this process is to simply just let it be and try to meet God wherever we know God's everywhere, but where I can become aware of what God's doing in that moment. And
Yeah.
I just want more and more of those each day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's one of the things that that is a prayer that we can make to God, that God just smiles at. Like, I long for this, God.
Yeah.
I long for this. And just keep making that a prayer that like an offering that we pour out and wait to see how God actually answers that longing. Because I think God does want to attend to those deep longings within us. So even if we can't, and allowing ourselves to let go of us doing it for God and allow God to do it for us.
Well, I know I need that. I wrote in one of my notes that I know I need the Spirit to call peace and stillness into me, because if you leave it to my own devices, my heart is going to be a chaotic, raging storm. So I know that I need to allow Jesus to do that, and that's part of that partner relationship, and that is my longing. As a dude that just wants to be still and tries to be still and just can't sit still, that there's still something more than just being still. There's your deep thought from Rob today. Yeah. But it's there, and I think we all long and hope for that. So as we close up here, as we head into Advent, what might be a prayer, maybe a simple breath prayer that we can add to the invitation to that? What are some images or some words that we can throw into our breath prayers to help ourselves focus on that? Would you mind closing us maybe in prayer with maybe some of those pictures or images? Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah. God, like the bird who looks for the thermals and just holds out its wings and allows the thermals to lift and help us soar. May we do the same by placing ourselves in the path of your grace and holding our arms out, and just, even if it's just a prayer to long for you to help lift us so we can see more than we can from the ground. Help us to be a channel Mary, who had a hectic peace in her in giving birth to your son, and yet she could ponder. We don't know how long she pondered. Was it 2 minutes? Was it 15? Was it an hour? We don't know. And maybe that's the beauty of it. But help us just to ponder sometimes what you have been up to, are up to. Just help us to, put our gaze outward and upward. And help us just draw our breath. That's the final component here, of just aligning our very breath in the life of the Trinity. So when all else fails, help us to take deep breaths in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Peace.
Peace.
Be still.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCCUMC. Once again, that's at WNCCUMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.